The photo hit the internet before the final bell even rang. A black four-star general in full dress uniform kneeling on the linoleum floor of an elementary classroom, his arms around a 10-year-old black boy who is crying into his chest. Behind them, a white teacher stands rigid by the desk, her face drained of color. Parents and fourth graders freeze mid-breath, caught in the flash. By Monday morning, America has an opinion. On cable talk shows, commentators point at the image and argue about race, respect, and the state of public schools. Opinion pieces talk about class and bias, about who is believed and who is not. Online, some people call it a clear case of racism. Others say it was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Many cannot look past the striking sight of a four-star general defending his son in a room where that boy was called a liar. Inside Jefferson Elementary, the noise from the outside world feels like a storm pressing against the windows. No one walks past room 4B without glancing in. No one looks at the woman who teaches there the same way. Mrs. Patricia Whitmore sits alone at a student desk long after dismissal, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. In front of her lies the front page of the local paper. The photo printed so large she can see the tear tracks on Lucas Hughes' face. Above it, the headline uses her name. Her phone will not stop buzzing in her tote bag. Calls from the principal, messages from the district, emails from other teachers that start with, "Are you okay?" and end with, "We need to talk." The words on the page blur, but the image does not. She feels sick, guilty, and strangely defensive all at once, as if her 23 years of teaching are on trial in a single snapshot. Across town in the modest Arlington apartment everyone is suddenly talking about, Lucas lies awake in his small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The glow from the parking lot slips through the blinds and cuts lines of light across his walls. He can hear the low murmur of his parents in the kitchen, the clink of a mug, his mother's tired sigh. He used to think that telling the truth was the safest thing you could do. Now he knows you can stand in front of a whole class, speak honestly about your father, and still be treated like you made it all up. The memory of chairs scraping, of kids staring, of his teacher's voice saying pathetic, loops in his mind like a bad song he cannot turn off. In the kitchen, General Vincent Hughes stands in a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, the uniform that shocked an entire school, folded away in the bedroom closet. On the table in front of him sits a single gold command coin, next to Lucas's worn backpack. He rests his fingers on the metal, feeling the weight of every campaign it represents. He has made decisions in war rooms that sent soldiers into danger. He has walked flight lines under fire. He has briefed presidents with a steady voice. Yet nothing has ever hollowed him out the way it did when he heard his son say in a shaking voice, "My dad did not raise a liar." Angela moves quietly behind him, refilling her coffee, dried blood still faint on the cuff of her scrubs from a surgery that ran long. They do not have to say what both are thinking. For all his stars, for all her training, neither of them was there in that moment when a classroom decided their son's truth did not count. Outside, traffic on the highway hums toward Washington, toward the Pentagon, where Vincent's title opens every door. Inside this small kitchen, he is just a father staring at a backpack and wondering how the system he served for 32 years could swallow his child whole in a single morning. How does an entire school, an entire set of adults, trust the instinct of one teacher over the truth of a 10-year-old black boy who dared to be proud of his father? 24 hours before that photo went viral, the Hughes apartment looked like any other rental in Arlington. 3 bedrooms, beige walls, carpet just a shade too thin, baseboards nicked where furniture had scraped past during yet another move. The kind of place you pass in a hallway and never wonder who lives behind the door. Inside, the smell of turkey bacon and toast drifted down the hallway. "Breakfast in 5, soldier." Lucas blinked awake to his father's voice. It was the same call he'd heard in base housing in Texas, in a cramped apartment in Germany, and now here in Virginia. He smiled before his eyes were even open. Career day. Finally. He shuffled into the kitchen in socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His father was at the table in a worn Georgetown sweatshirt and jeans, coffee mug beside his elbow, tablet propped up with emails he wasn't really reading. To anyone walking past the window, he looked like a middle-aged office guy catching up on work before heading downtown. His mother, Angela, stood at the counter in light blue scrubs, hair pulled back, badge from Walter Reed clipped at her collar. She was packing a yogurt into her bag with one hand and scrolling through her surgical schedule with the other. On the refrigerator door, a cheap magnetic calendar had a red circle around today's date. In Lucas's handwriting, Parent Career Day. Next to it, his crayon drawing of his father in full dress uniform, 4 neat silver stars on each shoulder, a big square grin on his face. "Morning, champ," Vincent said. "Sit. You're burning daylight." Lucas slid into his chair, shoulders buzzing with excitement. "Dad, can I tell them?" he blurted, reaching for his cereal. "About the time you met the president in the Situation Room, or when you flew on Air Force One, or that story about Korea when—" Angela and Vincent exchanged a look over the table. It was quick, practiced, the kind of glance parents share when they've had the same argument more than once. "Luke," Angela said gently, "remember what we talked about." "I know, but everybody else gets to brag," he said, spoon hovering midair. "Tyler's always talking about his dad and the senators. Sophia says her mom cleans all the important offices. Why can't I just say what you really do?" Vincent set his mug down. The clink sounded louder than it should have. "Our family keeps a low profile," he said. His voice was warm, but there was steel under it. "On every school form, my job is government employee. We don't hang up medals. We don't put pictures in the front hall. We don't post locations, dates, or names online. That's not about shame. That's about security. There are people in this world who do not need to know what I do." Lucas frowned. "But it's just my class." "It's never just your class," Vincent replied. "Your teacher talks to other teachers. Parents talk in the parking lot. Somebody posts on Facebook. It spreads. I've seen things go sideways over less." Angela rested her hand over his. "He's not wrong," she said softly, "but there's another side to it too." She turned to Vincent. "Public schools don't always treat black kids the same way, even in nice zip codes, especially when no one knows who their parents are." Vincent exhaled, a slow, controlled breath, like he was back in a briefing pushing emotion down under the facts. "It's 2020-something, Ange," he said. "This isn't the 80s. There are policies now. Training. We live in Arlington, not some backwater." She arched an eyebrow. "You really think bias stops at the county line?" He hesitated. Years of service had wired him to trust institutions, to believe that if you followed the rules, the structure would hold. The Army had promoted him, one rank at a time, for doing exactly that. The idea that a school might not extend that same basic fairness to his son sat in his chest like a stone he did not want to examine. "I think," he said finally, "that if we respect the system, it will respect us. We don't make noise. We don't ask for special treatment. We don't turn your classroom into a security headache. We show up, do right by people, and they'll do right by you." Angela looked at Lucas, then back at him. "That's not how it always works for our kids." Her tone was gentle, but the warning was there, especially when folks see a black boy from an apartment complex and decide they know his whole story. Lucas watched them, feeling the conversation slide into that grown-up territory where he wasn't sure if he was supposed to listen or pretend not to. "So, what can I say?" he asked quietly. "Do I have to lie?" Vincent's face softened. "No," he said. "You don't lie. You just keep it simple. You can say I work for the Army. You can say I help keep people safe. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not Tyler, not your teacher, not anybody." Lucas nodded slowly. It didn't feel like an answer, but it sounded like an order. Orders were what his dad was good at. Across town, Patricia Whitmore pulled into the Jefferson Elementary parking lot 15 minutes early, like she always did. She straightened the American flag pin on her blazer in the rearview mirror, smoothed her hair, and grabbed the Tupperware container of star-shaped cookies she'd baked for the guest speakers. Her classroom was already neat, desks in straight rows, the stars and stripes hanging perfectly parallel to the whiteboard. On one wall, framed photos showed her shaking hands with a city council member, posing with a state senator at an education award ceremony. She adjusted one of the frames so it hung perfectly level. 23 years, she thought with a small smile. She knew this job. She knew which kids would go far and which ones would need firm guidance. She knew which parents carried weight at the district office and which ones never showed up for conferences. If she was strict, it was because she cared. Someone had to teach these children humility, honesty, how not to exaggerate their importance. Her standards were clear, and when there was conflict, the system had always backed her. Principals came and went, superintendents changed, but a veteran teacher who kept her test scores high and her classroom orderly. The district trusted that. Down the hall, posters in Spanish and English celebrated diversity and inclusion. Jefferson Elementary was proud of its mix. Lobbyists' kids, embassy kids, children of enlisted soldiers from Fort Myer, first-generation immigrants whose parents cleaned those same office buildings. On paper, it was the American dream in miniature. In practice, teachers still checked addresses and skimmed over emergency contacts and made quiet calculations. Townhouse off Washington Boulevard meant one thing. The big condos by the river meant another. The aging apartment complex closer to the highway meant something else entirely. Names, neighborhoods, occupations all added up in the backs of their minds long before a child ever opened their mouth. At the apartment door, Vincent grabbed his keys and Lucas's backpack. Angela kissed Lucas on the forehead, then leaned in to kiss her husband too. "Just remember," she murmured, low enough that Lucas couldn't quite catch it. "Your rank won't walk into that classroom with him if you're not there." Vincent squeezed her hand. "He'll be fine," he said, more to himself than to her. "They're professionals. It's a good school. We've done everything right." In the hallway, he stopped, dropped to one knee so he was eye level with his son. His hand rested lightly on Lucas's shoulder. "Son," he said, "you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just keep it simple. Be respectful. Do your work. The rest will take care of itself." Lucas searched his father's face, looking for the certainty he heard in his voice. He wanted to believe the world was as straightforward as that. He nodded, because he trusted his dad. Neither of them knew that by this time tomorrow, that simple faith in the system was going to shatter under the weight of a single word: liar. The morning of career day, Lucas could feel his heart beating in his throat. He held his notebook tight against his chest as he walked down the hallway of Jefferson Elementary, the sounds of rolling backpacks and squeaky sneakers echoing off the walls. On the cover, in his careful block letters, he had written, "My dad's job." Room 4B buzzed with energy. Kids were already talking about who was coming to speak. Tyler Bennett was in his usual front row seat, one knee bouncing, grinning like he owned the place. "My dad had dinner with 3 senators last week," he told anyone who would listen. "He says one of them might run for president." "That is very impressive, Tyler," Mrs. Whitmore said from her desk, smiling brightly. "Public service at that level is such important work for our democracy." At the second row, near the window, Sophia Wilson raised her hand. "My mom works at the Capitol too," she said. "She cleans the offices at night. She knows where everything is. Sometimes she has to pick up the coffee cups the senators leave everywhere." "That is nice, Sophia," Mrs. Whitmore replied, her smile thinning. "It is good to take pride in your work. All right, class, let us focus. We have a lot to do before our guests arrive." Her tone made it clear which version of working at the Capitol counted more. Lucas slid into his seat in the middle row, Deshawn dropping into the desk beside him. "You got your paper?" Deshawn whispered. Lucas nodded and tapped the notebook. "Yeah, I rewrote it twice." At 10 o'clock the day before, Mrs. Whitmore had handed out lined paper and written the assignment on the board. 3 paragraphs. What do your parents do? Why does it matter? How does it help our community? Best handwriting. No spelling mistakes. For Lucas, the words had flowed faster than his pencil could keep up. 32 years of service. Iraq. Afghanistan. Korea. The long nights when his dad was just a voice on a laggy video call. The mornings when the bugle on base had woken them both before sunrise. He had ended on the sentence that mattered most to him. "My dad says leadership means serving others, not yourself." Now, as he waited for instructions, he ran his thumb along that last line inside the notebook, like it might bring him some kind of courage. "All right, everyone," Mrs. Whitmore said, clapping her hands once. "Take out your essays. Finish your last edits. Remember, honesty and humility. You do not need to exaggerate to make your family important." Deshawn leaned toward him. "Yo," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "Is your dad really a general?" Lucas swallowed. "Yeah," he said. "He just keeps it low-key. He does not like people making a big deal about it." That is wild, Deshawn said, eyes wide. My dad says your dad is a big deal on base. Before Lucas could answer, a shadow fell across his desk. Mrs. Whitmore was making her way between the rows, glancing at each paper. When she reached Lucas, she paused. Her eyes moved over the page, line by line. As she reached the first mention of 4-star general, something in her expression hardened. Her jaw tightened. She said quietly. Interesting. She did not ask him a question. She did not pull up a chair. She did not say, "Tell me more." She walked back to her desk, opened her planner, and in neat cursive wrote beside his name, "Fantasy/embellishment needs correction." She tapped the pen against the paper, convincing herself she was doing her job. 23 years of experience told her what was realistic. Generals lived in big houses, attended certain fundraisers, drove certain cars. Their children did not show up in scuffed sneakers from the apartment complex off the highway. She trusted that picture in her head more than the words of the boy who had written them. The next morning, the back of room 4B was lined with parents in folding chairs, a lawyer in a gray suit, a chef in a white jacket, a nurse still in night shift scrubs, a mechanic with grease under his fingernails. Murmurs and the occasional burst of polite laughter filled the spaces between presentations. Now, Mrs. Whitmore announced, before our guests speak, some of our students will share their essays. It is important that they learn to describe their families truthfully and modestly. One by one, children stood and read. Tyler talked about lobbying and infrastructure bills. The room hummed with approval. Sophia read about polishing floors under chandeliers and emptying trash cans in offices where laws were written. She spoke with quiet pride. The response was a sprinkling of polite claps, nothing more. Then, "Lucas Hughes," Mrs. Whitmore said. "You are next." Lucas stood, knees a little unsteady, notebook shaking just enough that he hoped no one noticed. He cleared his throat. "My dad is a 4-star general in the United States Army," he began. "He has served our country for 32 years in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He helps make important decisions to keep America safe." He could feel eyes on him, big and small. A few parents sat up straighter. In the back, one man in a suit raised an eyebrow. "There are only about 44-star generals in the whole military," Lucas read. "My dad worked his way up from second lieutenant. He says leadership means serving others, not yourself." "Stop." The word hit the room like a slammed door. Lucas froze. "Excuse me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "That is enough," Mrs. Whitmore said. She rose from her chair with slow deliberation. "Come to the front of the room, Lucas." He walked forward, each step heavy. He could feel the burn of 30 pairs of eyes between his shoulder blades. "Class," she said, turning to face the room. "This is actually a very useful teaching moment about something called embellishment. That means stretching the truth to make yourself sound more impressive." She put a hand on his shoulder, not gentle. "Lucas, what does your father actually do?" "He is a general, ma'am," Lucas said. His mouth felt dry. Her smile was thin. "Yesterday, I checked with the office. We have your enrollment forms on file." She picked up a folder from her desk, opened it, and held it up. "Your father is listed here as a government employee. That is quite different from a 4-star general, is it not?" "He puts that on forms because of security," Lucas said, feeling heat flood his face. "He does not like putting his rank everywhere. But he really is a general. He is flying back from Korea. He will be here at 10. "You will see." A few kids shifted in their seats. Deshawn stared at his desk, fists clenched. "Lucas," she said, voice sharpening. "I have been teaching for 23 years. I have met generals. I have taught generals' children. Their lives do not look like yours. They do not live in modest rental apartments. Their children do not attend this school. They do not come to career day unannounced from Korea." She turned back to the class. "Sometimes, especially when we come from certain communities, it can be tempting to make ourselves sound more important than we are," she said. "But that is not honesty. That is pretending." Lucas felt something crack inside his chest. There were 2 paths in front of him, and he knew it. He could look down, swallow the words, say, "Sorry, I lied," and rewrite his father into a nameless office worker. The adults would relax. The day would move on. The kids would whisper, but the spotlight would shift. Or he could stand in the only truth he had ever known, even if no one believed him. He thought about his dad's hand on his shoulder that morning in the hallway. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. Just keep it simple. He thought about the nights waiting for video calls from bases half a world away, about the empty chair at the table on holidays, about the 4 little stars on his crayon drawing on the fridge. When he spoke, his voice shook, but the words did not. "My dad did not raise a liar, ma'am," Lucas said. "My dad is a general. He is flying back from Korea. He will be here at 10. You will see." The room went silent. A few parents shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a lawyer, looked at Mrs. Whitmore with a frown. Her face flushed red. Instead of softening, she stiffened. "Enough!" she snapped. "You are being disrespectful. Go to the office. Now." Lucas did not move. His sneakers felt glued to the tile. "Class," she added, louder, for the parents' benefit. "Let this be a lesson. Honesty and humility matter, especially when you come from backgrounds where people already struggle with stereotypes about truthfulness. Making up fairy tales about being special does not help you. It hurts you." That sentence landed heavier than any scolding. It told the room exactly what she thought of where Lucas came from. Lucas finally turned, his vision blurring. He walked toward the door, shoulders drawn in, notebook hanging at his side. As he reached the threshold, he could feel every eye on his small back. This was no longer a simple assignment about what your parents do for a living. It was a judgment on whose truth counted and whose did not. On one side of the line stood a 23-year veteran teacher, convinced her instincts were law. On the other side, a 10-year-old black boy who had just chosen his dignity over his safety. The walk to the office felt longer than it ever had before. Lucas kept his eyes on the tiles, counting them as he went, trying not to hear the echoes of Mrs. Whitmore's words still bouncing around in his head. Pathetic. Certain communities. Fairy tales. Every few steps he glanced back over his shoulder, half expecting someone to call him back and say it was all a mistake. No one did. The front office smelled like coffee and copier toner. Mrs. Kemp, the secretary, looked up from her computer and gave him a practiced, polite smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore sent me," Lucas said, voice small. "She said I had to see the principal." "Principal Hayes is on a call," Mrs. Kemp replied. "Have a seat. Mr. Thornton can see you." Vice Principal Mark Thornton's door was open. He was in his early 50s, khakis and a school polo, graying hair cut short. He had the kind of face that looked permanently a little disappointed, like every kid he dealt with had let him down in advance. "Lucas," he said, glancing at a slip of paper on his desk. "Come on in, close the door." Lucas sat in the chair across from the desk. His feet did not quite reach the floor. Thornton picked up the referral form and skimmed it, lips moving slightly as he read. Defiance, refusal to correct false information in assignment, disrupting class. He opened a manila folder with Lucas's name on the tab and flicked through the pages. Emergency contacts, address, occupations. He nodded to himself. "All right," he said, leaning back. "Tell me what happened." Lucas swallowed. "I read my essay about my dad for career day," he said. "I wrote that he is a 4-star general. Mrs. Whitmore said I was lying. She said the form says he is a government employee, but he writes that for security. He really is a general. He is flying back from Korea. He is going to be here at 10. He pulled his phone from his pocket, hands shaking a little. "See? He texted me." He held out the screen. The message glowed bright. "Landing. Catching up on sleep. See you at school by 10 o'clock. Proud of you, son." Thornton barely glanced at it before waving it away. "Lucas," he said with a little chuckle, the kind adults used when they thought they were being kind, but were really just dismissing you. "Anybody can save a number in their phone as Dad. That does not prove anything." Lucas pulled the phone back slowly, feeling something heavy settle in his stomach. "It is really him," he said. "He works at the Pentagon. Sometimes he goes to the White House. He just does not like people knowing." "I get it," Thornton said, folding his hands. "Sometimes when kids feel overlooked, they tell big stories to get attention, especially kids from families where parents work a lot, or maybe there is only one parent at home. It is a cry for help. But inventing a whole thing about a 4-star general? That is a little much, don't you think?" "My parents are both at home," Lucas said, voice tightening. "My mom is a surgeon. My dad has been deployed 6 times. That is enough," Thornton cut in. Right now, this is not about your imagination. This is about your behavior. He leaned forward, his tone shifting into the one he probably thought of as firm but fair. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go back to class. You are going to apologize to Mrs. Whitmore for being disrespectful. You are going to apologize to your classmates and our guests for wasting their time. Then you are going to rewrite that essay with the truth about your father's job. If you do that, we can put this behind us. And if I do not? Lucas asked. He already knew the answer, but he needed to hear it. Then we will call your parents in for a disciplinary conference, Thornton said. And there will be a note in your file. That is not how you want your elementary school record to look, is it? Lucas stared at the edge of the desk, fighting back the sting in his eyes. The adults in charge of this place were supposed to believe him. Principal, vice principal, teacher, that was the order his mom had told him. If something is wrong, trust the adults. But every adult he had talked to so far had decided the same thing without really looking at him. Liar. Attention seeker. Kid from the apartments trying to play pretend. He stood up slowly. Yes, sir, he said. His voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. On his way out of the office, his thumb hovered over his father's name in his contacts. It would be so easy to hit call, tell him everything. Hear his dad's voice say, I am on my way, son. I believe you. But he pictured his father in some windowless room at the Pentagon, surrounded by generals and maps and screens. Important things, national security things. How was Lucas supposed to interrupt that with a story about a teacher who did not believe him? He slid the phone back into his pocket. He has enough to worry about, he muttered to himself. I do not want him to think I cannot handle school. By the time Lucas pushed open the door to room 4B, career day was in full swing. The desks had been pushed back to make room for a semicircle of folding chairs. Parents sat shoulder to shoulder, dressed for courtrooms, kitchens, hospital wards, construction sites. A poster on the board read, Our families serve our community. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the front, hands clasped. She spotted Lucas immediately. Ah, Lucas, she said brightly. Perfect timing. Come on in, sweetheart. Every head turned. Lucas felt heat crawl up his neck. He took a few steps inside and stopped, suddenly aware of how small he was in the middle of all these adults. Class, parents, Mrs. Whitmore said, Lucas has something he would like to say to all of us. He hadn't agreed to anything, but saying no in front of everyone felt impossible. Ma'am, he managed. Your apology, she prompted, still smiling, for not being honest in your essay. Her voice was sweet, but there was steel underneath. It was the tone that said, this is your chance to fix what you broke. Lucas looked around the room. Deshawn gave him a worried look from his seat in the second row. Tyler studied his shoelaces. A mom in scrubs frowned, just slightly, then looked away when she realized everyone could see her. If he apologized, the whisper would harden into truth. The story would become Lucas lied about his dad to impress people. It would cling to him longer than any note in a file. If he did not, he knew exactly how he would look to some of the parents in this room. A black boy with an attitude problem, difficult, defiant. The kind they watched a little more closely at the mall. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He started, then stopped. He thought of his dad again, not in a war room, but in their kitchen that morning, saying, You do not need to prove anything to anyone. I do not have anything to apologize for, Lucas said. His voice shook, but he kept going. My essay was the truth. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. One of the parents shifted in their chair. Mrs. Whitmore's smile froze. Excuse me? My dad is a general, Lucas said. I did not lie. Her tone cooled instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. Lucas, she said, I understand you want your family to seem special, but there is no shame in being ordinary. There are many honorable jobs your father could have. Office worker, clerk, support staff. Those are important too. She took a step closer, lowering her voice just enough that she could pretend she was being kind, even as everyone heard her. Kids from your community already struggle with stereotypes about honesty, she said. When you make up impossible stories, it only makes things worse. The words hit harder than if she had shouted, Your community, not just you, all of you. The room went very still. Lucas isn't lying. The voice came from the second row. Deshawn was on his feet before he seemed to realize he had stood. I have been to his house, he said. His dad leaves early all the time. He is gone on trips. My dad says he is important in the army. Just because they do not live in a big house does not mean— Deshawn, Mrs. Whitmore snapped. Sit down. This does not concern you. But it does, he protested. It is not fair. You did not even— Office, now. The word cracked like a whip. Deshawn's mouth fell open. For a second, it looked like he might argue. Then he grabbed his backpack, shot Lucas an apologetic, furious look, and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Lucas watched his only ally disappear down the hallway, the space beside him suddenly feeling twice as empty. Around him, parents avoided his eyes. Some looked ashamed. Others looked like they were just glad it was not their kid. No one said a word. The wall clock above the whiteboard read 9:28 a.m. In just over an hour, his father would walk through those doors in a uniform that proved everything Lucas had said was true. Right now, though, he was just a 10-year-old black boy standing in a room full of adults who had already decided his truth did not matter. He sank back into his seat, staring at the empty spot on his desk where his essay used to be before she tore it in half. The shredded pieces had gone into the trash can by the door. The story of his father's life, dumped like it was nothing. For the first time, it hit him that even when you tell the truth, the people with power can rip it up and throw it away. And there was no guarantee anyone would come to pick it up again. Inside room 4B, career day marched on like nothing had happened. A nurse talked about night shifts. A chef described the heat of the kitchen. Parents nodded. Children asked questions. On the surface, it looked like any other school event. But every few minutes, someone's eyes slid back to the small boy in the middle row, to the empty space on his desk, to Lucas Hughes, the kid who had just been publicly labeled a liar. Down the hall, the real earthquake started. In her office, Principal Dana Hayes held the phone between her shoulder and ear, pen hovering over a notepad. Yes, sir, she said slowly. A 4-star general, today, Jefferson Elementary, Parent Career Day. The voice from Fort Myers Protocol Office was crisp. Efficient. They needed to confirm parking for 3 vehicles, asked about entrances, asked if the school had any concerns about accommodating a security detail. Hayes wrote the name down as the officer spelled it. V-I-N-C-E-N-T-H-U-G-H-E-S. Hughes. Her eyes flicked to the discipline log on her desk. Room 4B. Student Lucas Hughes. Referral claimed father is 4-star general. Teacher reports fabrication. The pen dropped from her fingers. Oh my God, she whispered. A pulse of anger rose first, hot and sharp, at what had been said to that boy, at how fast everyone had believed the adult version of events. Right behind it came fear, for Lucas, for the school, for what it would mean when the story was no longer just theirs. A black 4-star general, a black child humiliated in a public school classroom. That kind of story traveled to the district office, to the Pentagon, to the press. Hayes was out of her chair before the call even ended. She strode down the hallway, heels striking the tile. At room 4B, she opened the door just enough to catch Patricia's eye. Ms. Whitmore, she said, voice tight. I need you, now. Patricia stepped into the hall, smoothing her blazer, forcing a smile. Dana, if this is about the little situation earlier, I can explain. The boy was clearly exaggerating. I was simply trying to teach him about honesty before Hayes cut her off. Did you accuse a child named Lucas Hughes of lying about his father being a 4-star general? Patricia blinked. Well, when you put it that bluntly, it makes me sound like a villain. I did not accuse. I questioned. There was no record of any General Hughes on file. He lives in those apartments by the highway. I have taught for 23 years. I know what is realistic for families like— Stop talking, Hayes said. The words came out sharper than she intended, but she did not take them back. In 15 years, as an administrator, she had never raised her voice to a teacher. Her pulse hammered in her ears now. The protocol office at Fort Myers just called. General Vincent Hughes is on his way here, right now. He is the boy's father. The color drained from Patricia's face. That cannot be right, she said weakly. There must be some mistake. The forms say government employee for security reasons, Hayes snapped. Because that is what senior military officials write. You never checked beyond that. You made assumptions based on where a child lives and what he looks like. I was just trying to maintain standards, Patricia whispered. Outside the front windows, the low rumble of engines grew louder. Both women turned. 3 black SUVs turned into the circular drive, moving with practiced precision. 2 men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning the grounds. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened. A tall black man emerged in full dress blues, the sunlight catching 4 silver stars on each shoulder. Medals glinted across his chest. His face was unreadable as he adjusted his cover and started toward the entrance. Patricia's knees wobbled. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. "Dear God," she breathed. In a few minutes, the narrator's voice seemed to say, "A man the world recognizes as power will walk into a room where his son was treated like a liar because of his skin and his address. And for the first time all morning, the adults will have to decide whose truth they are willing to face." General Vincent Hughes did not enter Jefferson Elementary with a marching band or a wall of agents. The security detail stayed outside per his orders. Inside, he walked the hallway with the steady, measured stride of a man used to inspecting barracks. The difference was in his eyes. They were not scanning for threats. They were searching for his son. Principal Hayes met him halfway. "General Hughes, thank you for coming," she said, voice tight. "We need to talk about what happened in room 4B. Behind her, Patricia hovered, hands twisting together. "General, I am so sorry," she began. "There was a misunderstanding. I did not have all the information. The forms were unclear. And with your son's essay, I simply thought—" Vincent looked at her, not unkind, but without letting her off the hook. "You did not verify," he said quietly. "You assumed." He did not raise his voice or flash his rank. He did not threaten lawyers or newspapers. He simply laid the truth down like a weight. When adults in authority make assumptions about children based on where they live or what they look like, that is not a misunderstanding. That is a failure of leadership. In room 4B, the chatter died the second he stepped through the door. Parents rose to their feet without thinking. 4 silver stars caught the fluorescent light. Lucas turned. For a heartbeat, he seemed frozen. Then the chair scraped back and he ran. "Dad." Vincent dropped to one knee on the classroom floor and pulled his son in. The most powerful person in the building, in full dress uniform, kneeling in front of third-hand desks and a faded rug. "I am here," he murmured into Lucas's hair. "I am sorry I was late." When he stood, he kept one hand on Lucas's shoulder and faced the room. "My son wrote that I am a 4-star general, that I have served 32 years, that I went to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. Every word of that is true," he said. "What he did not write is what that cost him and his mother. Birthdays I missed, moves every few years, nights he went to sleep without knowing what continent I was on." He looked at Sophia's mother, still in her janitor uniform, at the mechanic in the back. "Service does not always look like medals," he said. "It looks like night shifts and sore feet, and bringing home just enough to pay rent. My rank does not make my family more worthy of being believed than any other child in this room." Beside the board, Patricia's shoulders shook. "Lucas," she said, voice raw, "I was wrong. I judged you. I did not listen. I hurt you. You deserved better from me. I am so sorry." Vincent glanced down at his son. "Your choice, son," he said softly. "You decide how to answer." Lucas wiped his face with the back of his hand. His voice was small, but it carried. "Maybe you could believe kids more," he said, looking straight at his teacher, "even when their stories sound too big to be true." The room held its breath. The general had spoken about leadership and service. The real authority in that moment belonged to a 10-year-old boy who had every reason to be bitter and chose something else. Later, when someone suggested a class photo, it felt almost ordinary. Kids crowded around Vincent, some grinning, some still wide-eyed. Lucas stood in front, his hand wrapped tight around his father's. The camera clicked. At that instant, it was just a family picture in a 4th-grade classroom. No one in room 4B yet understood that the image would soon travel far beyond those walls, dragging all their assumptions into the light. The photo did not stay in room 4B. It leaked into inboxes, crawled across social media, landed on local news, then jumped to national outlets hungry for a clean narrative about race, power, and public schools. At first, the story was simple. Teacher calls black boy a liar. 4-star general dad shows up. Internet takes sides. For Patricia Whitmore, the fallout was less simple and far more intimate. The district launched an internal investigation. HR scheduled interviews. The teachers' union called and reminded her of her rights. The superintendent requested statements from parents. Every email came with subject lines that made her stomach clench. Incident in Room 4B, Media Inquiry, Civil Rights Compliance. But the emails that hurt most did not come from officials. They came from old students, from colleagues, from people she thought she knew. I saw the picture. I never realized you talked to some of us differently. I trusted you. In the mirror, the woman who looked back at her was not the patriotic, tough, but fair teacher she had always believed herself to be. She saw the tight smile, the way her mouth pinched when certain parents spoke, the slight flinch when a black boy raised his voice half an inch too high. Her voicemail filled with messages. Some defended her. Some called her a racist, and worse. Strangers demanded she be fired. Others insisted she was a scapegoat for a broken system. The investigation could not undo what she had said to Lucas. It could not untear the pages she had ripped. The real price came the first time she had to sit in a faculty meeting and talk about it. She stood up in the library, heart pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice over it. Rows of teachers watched her, some sympathetic, some wary, some defensive because they recognized pieces of themselves in her story. "I am not here to make excuses," Patricia said. "On career day, I looked at a black boy from an apartment complex and decided his truth was impossible. I used my years of experience as an excuse to ignore what he told me. That is not just a mistake. That is implicit bias. I am what that looks like." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Then someone shifted, coughed, looked down at their hands. No one applauded. That felt right to her. Applause would have been too easy. Across town, Lucas paid a different kind of price. People treated him differently now. Some kids crowded him at lunch, asking what it was like to have a dad who met the president. Others avoided him, like he had become radioactive, the center of something too big and complicated. Teachers smiled a little too hard. One of them called on him for every question in a lesson about civil rights, as if his very existence made her curriculum more authentic. Another pulled him aside to tell him how brave he was, then steered clear of him for weeks, nervous about saying the wrong thing. His name had been cleared, but the memory did not fade. When someone asked in a casual way, "So, what does your dad do again?" his stomach still tightened. His mind flashed back to the whiteboard, to the word liar hanging in the air. He started noticing things he had not seen before. Which kids got the benefit of the doubt when they were late? Whose jokes were waved off as boys being boys, and whose were labeled disrespectful? Which friends got away with eye-rolling and which ended up in the office? He was 10 years old and already seeing the world in layers he wished he could unlearn. Vincent and Angela carried their own share of the weight. In the weeks after the incident, they sat up late at the kitchen table more often. The command coin Vincent kept for special occasions sat between them, not as a token of pride, but as a reminder of their blind spot. "We thought keeping everything quiet would protect him," Angela said one night, hands wrapped around a cold mug of tea. "We told him to keep it simple, to not tell the whole truth. We taught him that his dad's rank did not define his worth," Vincent replied. "I still believe that, but I did not see how that secrecy left him standing alone when someone challenged his reality." He had spent a career avoiding the spotlight, believing that the best generals were the ones who kept their heads down and did the work. Now he was being asked to speak at school board meetings, to meet with district officials, to lend his name to policy changes. "I signed up to lead soldiers," he told Angela, "not panel discussions on equity." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You signed up to serve," she said. Sometimes that means combat zones. Sometimes it means cafeterias with bad coffee and parents who are scared for their kids. Our son does not need you to be anonymous anymore. He needs you to be seen. Jefferson Elementary also paid. Reporters called. So did representatives from military family organizations and local civil rights groups. A story about bias in a small school a few miles from the Pentagon was too symbolic to ignore. The district required implicit bias training for every staff member. New protocols were drafted. If a student claimed something that seemed unlikely about their family, the first step was now to verify with parents privately, not to challenge the child publicly. Disciplinary referrals for defiance and disrespect would be reviewed for patterns by race and class. The school's self-image as a model of diversity and fairness cracked. They had the posters on the walls, the multilingual flyers, the carefully worded mission statement. None of that had stopped a teacher from telling a black child that his truth did not fit her picture of who he was allowed to be. One evening, the cafeteria filled with folding chairs and the low buzz of adults talking too quietly. A town hall, the district called it. Listening session, community forum. At the front, under fluorescent lights, sat Principal Hayes, a district representative, a union rep, and Patricia. In the second row, Vincent and Angela sat side by side, Lucas between them. Parents stepped to the microphone. Some were angry. Some were careful. Military spouses spoke about being invisible when out of uniform. Black parents shared stories going back years, little cuts that never made the news. White parents admitted they had never had to think about whether their children would be believed. Eventually, it was Patricia's turn. She stood, walked to the mic, and looked out at the faces in front of her. Not anonymous commenters this time. Neighbors, students' families. "I hurt your child," she said, eyes on Lucas. "I told him his truth did not matter because it did not fit what I thought a general's family should look like. I wrapped it in words like honesty and humility to make myself feel righteous. It was not. It was prejudice. I cannot undo what I did, but I can own it, and I can change how I teach." No one clapped then either. That felt right too. Change, the room understood, would not be measured in applause. It would be measured in what happened the next time a child said something that sounded too big to be true. 3 months after Career Day, Jefferson Elementary looked the same from the sidewalk. Same brick walls, same playground, same flag flapping over the front entrance. The change lived inside the building, in the way people spoke and the way they listened. Every adult on staff had completed implicit bias training. Not the kind where you click through slides while checking your phone, but hours of uncomfortable conversation in the library. Real scenarios laid bare. They looked at their own discipline records by race. They walked line by line through what had happened in room 4B. They said words out loud that used to only live in whispers. Race, class, assumptions. New policies hung beside the fire drill chart. Believe first. Verify properly. If a child says something surprising about their family, you check with parents privately. You do not interrogate them in front of 30 people and tear their story apart along with their paper. Out of those meetings came something the adults had not planned. A group of students asked if they could help. That was how the Truth and Trust initiative started. Every Thursday at lunch, a handful of kids met in an empty classroom with a handwritten sign on the door. Truth Squad, it said, in blue marker. Inside, Lucas sat with Deshaun, Tyler, and Sophia at a cluster of desks pushed together. Younger students drifted in, awkward at first, then more confident as word spread. They talked about little things that did not feel so little. A teacher who always assumed certain kids had forgotten their homework. A playground monitor who believed one version of a fight before hearing the other. Times they had swallowed their own stories because they did not want to be labeled dramatic or angry. Lucas did not give speeches. He listened more than he talked. When a third grader asked what you are supposed to do if a teacher thinks you are lying, he said quietly, "Find another adult you trust. Do not let one person be the only judge of your truth." In room 4B, the command coin from General Hughes sat on Patricia's desk where everyone could see it. Students asked sometimes what it was. "It is a reminder," she would say, "that I was wrong once in a way that hurt someone, and that I do not get to forget that just because I feel bad. I have to teach differently because of it." Once a month, she pushed the desks into a circle and held Family Stories Day. No grades, no rubrics. Kids talked about night shifts and second jobs, deployments and immigration, what it felt like to share a bedroom with 3 cousins, or to have a parent who was never home because they were cleaning offices downtown. Patricia wrote notes, not to catch mistakes, but to remember details. She asked more questions now than she answered. When she spoke at education conferences, invited by people who wanted a neat redemption arc, she always started the same way. "I am not the hero of this story," she said. "I am the warning." Sometimes the room shifted uncomfortably. No one liked to imagine themselves in her place, looking at a child and choosing their own bias over his words. But some of them knew they had done smaller versions of the same thing. That was the point. Vincent and Angela came to school more often, usually in jeans and sneakers, carrying coffee and signing in at the office like any other parents. The staff knew who he was now, but they had stopped staring at the stars that never appeared on his shoulders in that building. They greeted him as Mr. Hughes, not General, because that was who he wanted to be there. Lucas's dad, the one who showed up for band concerts and parent meetings and Truth Squad presentations. The echo of that one morning traveled far beyond Arlington. Across the country, numbers told a story that sounded a lot like Lucas's, without the part where a powerful father walked through the door. Black students still face suspensions and expulsions at several times the rate of white classmates for the same behaviors. Most of those punishments came under vague categories like disruption or defiance, words that depended entirely on an adult's judgment. Studies showed that black boys were often seen as older, less innocent, more threatening, even in elementary school. Less benefit of the doubt, less grace, less childhood. Most of those kids did not have anyone with 4 stars on their shoulders to back up their version of events. Their assignments were torn up quietly. Their referrals never went viral. Their names did not trend. That is what gives Lucas's story its weight and its warning. It is not just about one boy who was eventually believed. It is about how close he came to being swallowed by a system that was ready to call him a liar and move on. Consequences arrived for everyone at Jefferson Elementary, but not as simple punishment. They came as a mirror. Patricia had to see who she really was in that classroom, not who she liked to imagine. Vincent had to see that his silence about his own status had left his son exposed. The school had to see that diversity posters on the walls did not mean much if a black child's truth could be ripped up that easily. Lucas had to see that telling the truth could cost you something, and then decide if he still believed it was worth paying. He did. In the end, the loudest truth in that classroom was not the rank on a man's shoulders. It was the voice of a 10-year-old boy who refused to lie about who his father was or about who he was. The real question now is not what happened to them. It is what you do the next time someone's story sounds too big to be true. Whether you are more like the teacher who assumed or the child who stood anyway.